No.
I don't think you have. Maybe you did and we both forgot everything he does. I didn't have the heart to tell me plagiarized. He's all boy with a really tender heart.
Sandra Bullock returned from New Orleans with a 3-month-old kid in January 2010. Louis was his given name. That little boy is now a teenager who offers professional advice to his Oscar-winning mother. But here's the unexpected part. Sandra hasn't talked about someone from her past in years, yet Louis looks just like them. Identical features, including jawline, eyes, and behavior, are captured in the photographs. Because of how similar they are, even Sandra's closest friends felt compelled to ask her some unsettling questions. There is no movie plot that can compare to the truth. Arlington, Virginia is the site of her birth on July 26, 1964. The German opera singer Helga Meyer was her mother, while the American vocal instructor and military veteran John Bullock was her father. Defense Forces. Sandy Bullock, on the other hand, was born and raised outside of the United States. Her family relocated to Nuremberg, Germany, when she was a little girl. There she immersed herself in European culture, learned the language, and grew up surrounded by music. The family frequently relocated around Europe due to her mother's opera profession. Sandra spent her childhood in the wings of magnificent theaters, close to the performers. Sandra had graduated from spectator to participant in operas by the time she reached the age of 5. She sang in world-renowned operas such as Carmen and The Magic Flute, with children's choirs in live performances around Europe. She had to study actual music, practice with experts, and adhere to rigid timetables for these shows. They weren't school plays. She gave a German performance. Soon after, she mastered self-control. Sandra was out on the road with artists, sitting in orchestra pits and standing under stage lights, while other kids her age were playing at home. It wasn't always a picnic, though. She saw the impact of the cultural change when her family moved to the Washington, D.C. region after returning to the United States. She was an outsider. Her unflattering German attire was the target of her classmates' mockery. She didn't fit in anywhere. It was as if none of them could comprehend the other. Although she carried the bitter taste of rejection with her, she learned empathy from that experience. She understood what it was like to be the one on the outside looking in. She was born and raised speaking German, and she maintains her fluency in the language even now. She is a dual citizen of the United States and Germany. Her perspective on life was molded by that amalgam of identities. Her performances took on a more authentic and unique quality as a result. Authenticity derived from two worlds was what she contributed to a world where cookie-cutter Hollywood stars were prevalent. From moving locations to attending different schools to making new acquaintances, her life was one with upheaval. By the time she was 8 years old, she had already lived in many locations across Austria and Germany. Her life on the go honed her adaptability, social skills, and ability to read rooms. It also hardened her. You need to learn to be stable if you want to withstand that type of volatility. East Carolina University was her next stop after finishing high school. She was almost a graduate of her theatrical program. While she had 3 credits remaining in 1986, she decided to drop out. School, she claimed, was dull. New York City was more important to her than a degree. She relocated there on the strength of a dream, not a promise of anything. Things were rough in New York City. Cash was tight for her. During the evenings, she served cocktails, checked coats, and worked as a bartender. Beginning at 2 in the morning, she would complete her shift. Before the bell rings at 6. Her meager income from ramen and coffee allowed her to survive in her cold, cramped flat. However, she persevered. She learned humility from that struggle. She recognized the difficulty of life. You can't fake being thankful and tough on TV. and that's exactly what it did to her. Her film debut was in the 1987 low-budget thriller Hangman. It went unnoticed. Who Shot Pacango and Religion, Inc. were among the subsequent direct-to-video features. Almost none of them are still in circulation, and even fewer have been successful. Sandra, however, seemed unfazed by them. According to her, they showed her the ropes and brought her back to square one. In 1988, she had her breakthrough role in a little off-Broadway production named No Time Flat. Even though it wasn't a major production, a talent agency noticed one performance. Bionic Showdown, The $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman, a 1989 television film, was her first part after he signed her. She portrayed a scientific student. She got noticed even though it wasn't a starring part. At long last, she got a lead in 1990. Working Girl, a comedy adapted from the successful film, landed her the lead role on NBC. She had a brief role as Tess McGill on the short-lived program that was canceled after only 12 episodes due to low viewership and negative reviews. Nonetheless, she was able to get her foot in the door and, more significantly, she learned that failure isn't the end. It wasn't because Sandra Bullock was the first choice when she got the part of Annie Porter in Speed in 1994. Even the role wasn't designed for someone with her personality. Annie was originally envisioned as a tough black paramedic. The leading candidate, Halle Berry, declined despite her popularity following her breakout role in Boomerang. At a later point, she made light of the fact that she was unhappy with her screenplay and didn't want to be the bus driver. Notable figures such as Kim Basinger and Melania Streep were also on the table. Sandra did not appear for the audition since she was not on anyone's radar. She had a simple set consisting of a folding chair and a paper plate for a steering wheel. Something clicked despite its raw and unrefined state. Even though he wasn't the studio's first pick, her connection with Keanu Reeves was explosive. That idea would turn out to be the film's winning formula. Nobody anticipated Speed to become a smash blockbuster when it opened in theaters on June 10, 1994, but it did. On a budget of only $30 or $37 million, the picture grossed $350.4 million globally, which is approximately 10 times the return. Sandra Bullock became viral overnight, becoming a household name across the world and a major celebrity in Hollywood. She went on to star in romantic comedies the following year. Another huge hit, 1995's While You Were Sleeping, made $182 million worldwide. She received a Golden Globe nomination for her performance. Suddenly, she was a rom-com queen in addition to an action star. Studios understood she might be a moneymaker because audiences adored her. She was now officially marketable. Sandra also took a risk that year. A producing firm was founded by her. In 1995, she and her college classmate Mark Brunetti founded Fortis Films. April 16, 1996 was the official registration date. Both the Austin, Texas, and the West Hollywood, California offices of the corporation were operational. The first 5 years were presided over by her sister, Sandra Bullock Prado. Sandra had expanded her role beyond performing to include producing, negotiating, and creating her own destiny. She went so far as to negotiate a first-look agreement with the powerhouse Warner Brothers in 1997. She supported causes she felt strongly about through her company, Fortis Films. The 1998 film Hope Floats, the 2000 film Miss Congeniality, and the 2002 film 2 Weeks' Notice were all produced by the same studio. They were all successful at the box office. Even the 2002-2007 TV comedy George Lopez, which she produced, was her first into television. Sandra was pioneering a new norm for actresses in the 90s when very few were taking the lead. Nonetheless, There were some poor choices. Released in 1997, Speed 2: Cruise Control was an absolute disaster. Sandra had her doubts, and Keanu Reeves didn't come back. Despite her $500,000 from the previous picture, Fox was interested in her and offered her $11 million. She did more than simply agree. She really struck a bargain. If the studio would back her dream project, Hope Floats, she would do Speed 2, she promised them. She made something she believed in while taking a blow because Fox agreed. Even though the film bombed, she still made a tidy profit from her risk. Even though it cost up to $160 million, Speed 2 only made $164.5 million globally, leaving almost little profit. The narrative was poor, the pacing was sluggish, and Keanu was missing, all of which led critics to slam the film. A Razzie for Worst Remake or Sequel went to the picture. Sandra subsequently said that it was a humiliating ordeal and made light of the fact that she thought just 5 people had enjoyed it. Because her godson was so enamored with the TV show Monster Garage, Sandra Bullock planned a surprise garage tour for him in December 2003. In Long Beach, California, presenter Jesse James constructed unique bikes worth $300,000. That's where Sandra took the kid, so she could leave him with a lasting impression. Something more, though, clicked, and it wasn't a simple garage visit. Sandra and Jesse were very much in love. He had a reputation as a tattooed biker, whereas she was America's darling. It was completely unexpected for that visit to develop into anything more than a casual acquaintance, much less a marriage. They tied the knot in Santa Barbara on July 16, 2005. Sandra had reached the age of 41 when she met Jesse, who brought along 3 children, including Sonny, who was born to adult film actress Janine Linda Mulder. Janine has a criminal record in addition to her career as a porn performer. After Janine's incarceration for tax evasion and a protracted and ugly custody battle, Sandra and Jesse finally gained custody of Sonny in December 2009. Sandra welcomed Jesse's children with open arms, rather than only tolerating them. "I married into children," she said at one point. "Those kids are the best." That response demonstrated she wasn't only a Hollywood celebrity playing house. It hushed many detractors and showed that her worry and affection were no less than if she had that child naturally. Unfortunately, the dream was dashed. There was a media frenzy in March of 2010 following Sandra's first Oscar, which she received for The Blind Side. Tattoo artists, strippers, and even an employee of Jesse James's company were among the 5 women who came forward alleging that he had an affair with them while they were married. A public show, not only an act of treachery. There was a lady named Michelle Bombshell McGee who sold her story to the tabloids, exposing information such as messages, meetings, and more. By the time Jesse made his public confession, it was already too late. An Oscar, which should have been her crowning achievement, instead served as a sobering reminder of all she had lost. She had just 10 days to revel in her good fortune. March 7, 2010. Her important victory. On March 17, 2010, the cheating incident came to light. Her career had been a colossal failure, and she was instead engulfed in despair. Photojournalists set up camp outside her house. Everything in her personal life was exposed. She had kept the fact that she was adopting a newborn boy a secret from everyone, which only made matters worse. Even though she was now adopting solo, she had taken 3.5-month-old Louis home in January 2010. She initiated the divorce proceedings on April 23, 2010. Up until June 28, 2012, the procedure took an eternity. She remained silent the entire time, her attention fixed on Louis. "How can one go through the grieving process without injuring their child?" she said at one point. She was determined not to let her sorrow to impact her son's first year on this earth. It required a level of bravery that is seldom seen. Despite the uproar and controversy, she managed to keep Louis's adoption a secret. She kept his lime green socks in her handbag as a subtle reminder of their relationship, even at the Oscars. Sandra still felt the specter of Hurricane Katrina lingering in the city of Louis's birth, New Orleans. "Something told me that my child was there," she remarked. She felt a strong draw to the area, and the connection became clear when Louis came. The city held an indescribable magic for her. She became an invisible member of the community, delivered surprise speeches, and gave a school hundreds of thousands of dollars. Instead of adopting a kid, she took on a task. To honor the late jazz great Louis Armstrong, she gave him the name Louis. His mother's middle name was Louise. Therefore, there were several meanings behind his middle name, Bardot. It was derived from a German saint, a Buddhist idea of life and death, and a tribute to her. There was significance in every aspect of the name: music, history, and healing. Sandra did it again in 2015, this time for a little girl called Layla, who was 2.5 years old. Layla was a native of Louisiana, much like Louis. Her traumatic experience in foster care had left her with profound anxieties. Even after the adoption was finalized, the paparazzi continued their pursuit, even accompanying them to the hospital department. However, Sandra resisted. She was a furious mother who would do anything to defend her daughter. Because she wanted to learn more about trauma, she even joined a parenting class. Louis was there to reassure Layla throughout. According to Sandra, Louis was the one who started it all. Sandra Bullock went back to her Bel Air estate on June 8, 2014, in the wee hours of the morning. She was eager to get some sleep after a busy day. She slid into bed after a shower, oblivious to the impending catastrophe. The nanny had brought Sandra's kid Louis to her adjacent apartment that night, assuming Sandra would get home late, so her son Louis wasn't there. His life may have been spared by that uncomplicated choice. Sandra heard a disturbance, followed by another, at about 1 o'clock in the morning. It continued to draw nearer, leading her to believe it was emanating from her exercise room. Then it hit her. The house had intruders. Fearful and alone, she fled into her closet after locking the door to her bedroom. The woman pleaded for assistance by dialing 911 in a low voice. She was completely preoccupied. She was currently experiencing a story similar to the ones she had seen on 48 Hours in Deline. However, she had just recently watched the show. "This doesn't end well," she thought, her voice betraying her fear. Until the authorities came, she remained concealed. Time seemed to stand still. Her home invader was none other than Joshua James Corbett. She had been pursued by him for days. He had waited outside her gates, taking notes, and the police ultimately concluded that he was obsessive. He sneaked in that night through a sunroom door after jumping the fence and ringing her doorbell for about 15 minutes. Along with a concealed carry permit from Utah, a letter addressed to Sandra and magazine articles featuring her likeness were found in his rucksack. Even though he didn't need to, Corbett did not bring one of his 8 registered guns that night. What he said was unsettling enough. He made note of her son and wrote, "You are my wife by law, the law of God, and you belong to me," in his notebook. Sandra changed drastically after that night. At a later point, she said she was flapping. Very severe post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, set in. On occasion, her tears would begin as soon as she glanced to the left, through the vehicle window. It was a recurring theme. Neither caution nor reason was there. Deep down, the trauma lay dormant. She was worried about her son's future as a single parent. Will he ever be able to feel her anxiety? Can he claim it as his own? She sought out EMDR therapy, a form of psychotherapy tailored to trauma survivors, since she was hell-bent on preventing it from happening. She felt like she was able to get back on her feet after that. Her condition improved gradually. At the same time, Corbett's life kept going downhill. His arrest followed the break-in, and he is currently being detained on a bail of $2 million. His guilty pleas to burglary and criminal stalking were entered in 2017. Mandatory mental health therapy, a no-contact order lasting 10 years, and 5 years of probation were all handed down to him. But by 2018, he no longer appeared in court. The cops showed up at his house on May 2nd to take him into custody. Barricade himself within, Corbett. The 5-hour standoff ended when a SWAT unit showed up. He had committed suicide by the time they got into the house. Meeting Brian Randall in January 2015 wasn't Sandra Bullock's intention. He was only a photographer she hired for her son Louis' 5th birthday celebration. The photographer Randall, who had a background as a model, suddenly appeared with his camera. But there was a powerful connection between them. A few months later, they were spotted together at the wedding of Jennifer Aniston and Justin Theroux. They were first seen by the world as a couple that August night in 2015. Despite the rapid pace, we never felt hurried. The three of them, Sandra, her adopted children Louis and Layla, and Randall, moved in together. In 2016, her loved ones said that she was the happiest person they had ever met. In addition to being a business partner, Randall took on the role of father figure. In addition to maintaining contact with his daughter from a prior relationship, he assisted in raising the children as his own. After Sandra's traumatic 2010 divorce from Jesse James, she found someone who helped her find some peace amidst the turmoil. During an interview with Red Table Talk in 2021, she discussed Randall candidly. Not only was he patient, but he was also the example I'd want my children to have, according to her. His parents were the most entertaining. He was a good role model even when they were at odds. Despite the constant activity and children, their home became a sanctuary anchored by love and away from the spotlight. Despite the seeming calm, a tempest had already started to brew. Randall received the devastating diagnosis of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, in 2020. Muscle paralysis progressed to the point that he could no longer regulate his respiration or speech. Only a couple of years following a diagnosis do the majority of ALS patients manage to stay alive. Randall stayed for 3 days, and nobody outside the house had any idea. Because Sandra and Randall didn't want their children to see a loved one deteriorate, they withheld everything from them. They isolated themselves in a protective cocoon surrounded by caring caregivers and as much everyday life as they could manage. Sandra ceased assuming significant positions and devoted herself to him, the children, and keeping everything together. Sandra transformed their home into a care facility, according to her sister Gina, who spoke about it afterwards. Assisting patients was like having family. Sandra was the most stringent in her lockdown during the COVID-19 epidemic. Very few individuals were permitted inside. She was aware that Randall's voice, movement, and breath would be taken away by ALS, but she was adamant that it wouldn't steal their peace. Brian Randall passed away at the age of 57 on August 5, 2023. Sandra was present. Children were as well. The family released a brief message upon his passing. While quietly grieving, they expressed gratitude to the medical staff who had treated them. They also requested privacy. Michael Oher believed he belonged to a kind household. Everyone others did as well. The Blind Side made millions of dollars when it opened in 2009. Sandra Bullock's portrayal of Lee Ann Tuohy was honored with an Academy Award. A rich white family adopts an impoverished black youngster with a football talent. It's a touching story. O'Hare, however, demolished that positive reputation in August 2023 with a legal bombshell. Claiming the Tuohys never adopted him, he sued them in Shelby County, Tennessee. He said that they had duped him into signing papers giving them control of his life when he turned 18 in 2004. He thought he was officially joining their family, but what he really experienced was the imposition of a conservatorship, a legal protection often reserved for those with impairments. O'Hare was a talented young guy who was set to begin his collegiate football career. He had no impairments, but the judge upheld it nevertheless. After serving for 43 years, Judge Kathleen Gomes of Tennessee stated that she had never saw a conservatorship utilized in such a manner. O'Hare was unaware that the Tuohys have legal authority over his narrative and choices until February 2023, when he discovered the truth. He wasted no time in pursuing legal action. He petitioned the court to discharge the conservatorship, disclose any funds earned in his name, and compensate him for his losses. Not only did the lawsuit rock the Tuohy home, but it also revealed a larger problem: the funding for the blind side. O'Hare said he received almost no compensation despite the film's $304 million global gross. Along with $225,000 and 2.5% of the film's net earnings, he asserted that the Tuohys and their 2 biological children had received. He had no idea the contract existed, much less that he would be awarded a portion. The original book's author, Michael Lewis, was a personal friend of Sean Tuohy and was instrumental in securing that deal. Nothing was accepted by the Tuohys. They claimed that O'Hare, Lee Ann, Sean, and the other 3 family members all received equal compensation. The authors said that they earned an average of $14,000 from the book and as much as $138,000 from the movie. However, O'Hare's legal team brought to light the fact that, despite the legislation requiring it, no financial records had ever been submitted. They said O'Hare was left out of the gains when the Tuohys took use of his popularity through the conservatorship. People started paying attention to the movie while the court battle was going on. A large number of reviewers felt the film contributed to the larger issue of the white savior narrative. Rather of highlighting the plight of O'Hare, the video portrayed a wealthy white family saving a disadvantaged black child. Many started to doubt the film's veracity following the litigation. Sandra Bullock was even asked to surrender her Oscar by some. They felt that the tale was skewed and hurtful because of her performance, regardless of how fantastic it was. Bullock did not face outright accusations, but the criticism was substantial. She thought she was sharing an uplifting narrative, but now she sees that she may have contributed to the development of a misleading impression. Her heart sank. The project had been a high point of her career, but now she hated that it was associated with greed, deceit, and treachery. The timing was just disastrous. After 8 years of marriage, Bullock's longtime companion Brian Randall passed away 9 days before. The case was filed following a private struggle with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. She had concealed his illness from the public by staying by his side when he was sick. Bullock had yet to make her first public appearance following his death, and she was still in sorrow when news of the case broke. Ryan Reynolds, Jennifer Aniston, Keanu Reeves, and Sylvester Stallone were among Bullock's supportive friends, but she still felt overwhelmed. Concurrently, she was bereaved and seeing the disintegration of a moment of which she had been most proud. Those closest to her say she was in a great deal of agony, but she was acting composed behind the scenes. 2 losses crushed her. One was personal, and the other was the tale she had worked so hard to write. In January of 2010, at the tender age of 3 months, Sandra Bullock took in little Louis. Louis is no longer a baby. 15 years have gone. He towers above his 5'7" mother and exudes self-assurance as a towering adolescent. Photos of the two of them together are uncommon, but when they do occur, it shows that Louis has matured into a man with his mother's expressive features and serene fortitude. Sandra has frequently expressed the belief that Louis was destined to be hers, despite the fact that they are not biologically related. She thinks he's ideal. His maturity matches his towering stature. According to Sandra, Louis even offers her career advice. Those close to her have also noted that Louis exudes an air of subtle wisdom that commands attention wherever he goes. Meanwhile, Sandra always envisioned her children growing up in a world where cameras were constantly clicking. She made a decision in 2015 when she adopted Louis and her daughter Layla. She would shield them from the mayhem of celebrity. Just to prove how seriously she takes their privacy, she even had her late partner, Brian Randall, sign a non-disclosure agreement before he could spend actual time with her children. The road to motherhood wasn't easy for Sandra. She began the adoption procedure with her ex-husband, Jesse James, but she continued it solo following their divorce. Another round of storms followed. She was the victim of a home invasion in 2014. She suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, after the ordeal. Although therapy aided in her recovery, the fear persisted. Brian Randall, her longtime partner, passed away from amyotrophic lateral sclerosis in 2023, causing her yet another devastating loss. Sandra has remained steadfast in her support of her family. She has described them as understanding, loving, and nut jobs. In spite of all the difficulties, she never lost sight of her goal of providing a secure and loving home for her children. Meanwhile, Sandra's career continued to rise. A small role in Hangman in 1987 was the beginning. Everything changed in 1994 with the release of Speed. More than 50 films spanning comedies, dramas, action hits, and animation spanned the subsequent 3 decades in which she starred. In addition to her Oscar, Golden Globe, and SAG Award wins, she received another nomination for Gravity and went on to win the Oscar for The Blind Side. Even the Hollywood Walk of Fame bestowed her with a star in 2005. For reasons beyond her films, her fans refer to her as America's sweetheart because of the authentic, friendly, and humorous impression she leaves on audiences. Sandra has a knack for retaining viewers in her films, whether it's Miss Congeniality or The Lost City. She has been a Hollywood star for over 35 years, and that hasn't diminished her adoration. Hers is an inspiring tale of perseverance, resilience, and an unending devotion to loved ones.